Funko Pops, the little vinyl figures with big heads. We all know someone who owns way too many. You've probably got a few sitting around yourself, but behind the painted vinyl and those colorful boxes of what seems like every character ever lies a company that's in some serious financial trouble. Sales are shrinking, debt is ballooning, and Funko itself has warned it might not survive the next year. Today we're diving into how Funko went from a scrappy startup to a collectible powerhouse and why that ride might be coming to an end. Welcome back to another Sucks to Suck production. I know you're used to seeing card content from me, but today we're going to go over Funko Pop and the imminent failure of the company. And I figured it'd be good to kind of look at where they came from and how they got to where they're at today. Now, I'm going to be reading off some of my notes that I've taken here, so forgive me for not making eye contact the whole time, but let's get into it. So Funko was founded in 1998 by this guy named Mike Becker, and it all started because he wanted a big boy mascot bobblehead, and he couldn't find one for an affordable price, so he decided to make one. And when he released the product, it wasn't very successful, but shortly after, he secured licensing deals from Austin Powers, and that seems to be where he got his big break. So in 2005, he then sold the company to a guy named Brian Mariotti, who was able to secure major license deals from DC Comics, Marvel, Star Wars, all these types of things. And eventually in 2010, they debuted the Pop vinyl line, which is what they're mostly known for. So the 2010s were actually really great for Funko. That was their peak golden era. They were selling like crazy. They were immensely popular. They started showing up on shelves at Walmart, Target. You had the Chase Pops, which were very popular, right? You wanted to get that Chase, get there as soon as the next delivery hit the shelf. Um, and as they continued to grow, they decided that they wanted to take the big boy step and become a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ. So, 2017, they did just that. They went public on the NASDAQ, had a terrible IPO, but they kept trucking and then started to diversify their product line so they could become just the company of pop culture. The most notable other brand they've got that you've probably seen and didn't even know they own is Loungefly, which is an accessories brand. They make backpacks, purses, things like that, along the same lines based off pop culture. And everything was going pretty well. They also had these super rare, super collectible pops that would be released at things like Comic Cons and conventions, exclusives. And those things would fetch a pretty penny. And it really drove the collecting aspect of, I got to get these Funkos because I may not get them in the future and they could go up in value. They had their own app that they eventually came out with where you could scan the pop and see how much it's worth right now. Honestly, it was fine until market oversaturation took place. And I feel like Funkos really go along the lines of Beanie Babies, right? Like that's the same vibe I've gotten from them. Uh, they just made too many for everything, right? And they told everybody these are all going to be a great collectible and be worth money one day. You had a whole, you buy the pops, but you didn't take them out of the box, and then you bought the box to put the box in to keep the main box safe, right? It was this whole collectible aspect that went along with it and really drove hype on certain pops. Um, but the curse of being a publicly traded company is your stockholders want value. They want to see growth. They want to see growth in your margins. They want to see growth in your profit, your sales, everything. And when you're selling collectible little vinyls, right, there's only so much you can do. And Funko's answer to that was get more licenses, release more pops. And they did just that. And we've gotten to a point now, even now, where there's literally a pop for every minuscule character that you could think of. I, at my Target for the longest time was like every character from Marvel Eternals, right? A movie that was not great to begin with. It didn't do great. And then you've got this whole line of pops where you've got even the most minuscule characters on a pop and the shelves are full of them. Like, who were y'all thinking the market was for that? Who's going to buy all that junk? And the good pops go, right? Pokemon pops are still going to sell. Pops from iconic series like The Office or Friends or Seinfeld or The Simpsons, those are going to sell. right? But these little beeline characters that they really tried to pump out there weren't going anywhere. And I feel like now between oversaturation and fatigue, market fatigue, and then pile on top of that, like that's already devastating to a company, but now we're in a time where people just aren't really spending money like that. And all these things have accumulated into this great distress for the company. And that's why I always say, like, going public isn't necessarily always the great thing you think it is, because the stock market is greedy. They want more and more and more. And maintaining the same sales as last year isn't good enough for them. And that's why I always think that it's better as a company sometimes just to stay private. Because had Funko not gone public, not gone through this whole deal where they're beholden to a bunch of board members and stockholders, they could have kept going at a steady rate. They could have kept releasing pops and figures that people actually care about. They could have not oversaturated the market with their product. And then you've got the thing like the lawsuit where they were purposely over shipping to places like Target and Walmart, dumping product on these stores. Um, all these motives for growth or what killed them or is going to kill them. Right? They're still moving along right now, but they're in dire straits, and we'll go over those numbers here in a minute. But it's another example of taking something, pumping the market full of it to the point that people just stop caring. It's no longer fun or unique. You've only got so much space in your room to put these freaking things on a shelf, and eventually a collector is going to stop collecting. One of my favorite stories about Funko, which I think was a year or two ago, where they literally made the financial decision to take a bunch of pops that were sitting on shelves in their warehouses that no stores wanted, they couldn't move them, and pay a landfill to take them, which I forgot how much money that cost them. It was a big news story at the time. It cost them a bunch of money. And because it was cheaper to take this product that was already made and paid for by the company to sell and then pay somebody to throw it all in the trash than it was to keep it on the shelf and store it. Matter of fact, I found the story because it was just too good not to tell you. So in 2023, Funko sent an estimated $30 million worth of its vinyl pop figures to landfills in Arizona because it was cheaper than paying for storage and disposal fees. Okay, $30 million worth of pops. Now we're paying what, 10 to 15 a pop? So you can only imagine how cheap they are for them to produce them, right? So God knows how many pops that was. All I know is someday archaeologists from whatever species or generation of humans 1,000 years from now are digging to find our history of the past. They're going to stumble upon this landfill full of these stupid little plastic figures and be like, what in the world's going on here? But just to get into the 2025 financials a little bit, let you know what's leading to them making these headline articles that they're probably going to go out of business or go bankrupt and have to sell something, right? Uh, in Q2 2025, they reported a net sales of 193.5 million, which sounds like a big number, but it was a 22% drop from the previous year. Their margins dropped from 42 to 32.1%, which that's substantial, right? That's the profit line. That's how much money you're making off your pops. They recorded a net loss of $41 million in that same quarter. Their total debt by Q2 of this year was at $256.6 million in the hole. According to their 10Q filing, they basically said there's substantial doubt about their ability to continue going without refinancing or major changes. The cash flow as of Q3 has gone negative, which, I mean, that's the death of a business right there. No cash flow, you can't do anything, and nobody's going to give you credit when you're already a failing business. And then, of course, they've gone through multiple leadership changes, including CEOs, people that come in there and think, man, I'm going to turn this company around, and they just don't. Doesn't work out. So I guess the last question is, how do they survive? How do they make it through this? Will they make it through this? Or will they be a thing of a bygone era? And the truth is, I just don't know if they've got the gas to get there. They've done a bunch of things like introduce little minifigs and just all these different things that they've tried to implement to bring it back from the brink of death. But I think it's all too little, too late. Um, a lot of people don't know, but like licensing fees are exuberantly expensive. Like they are probably the biggest expense for Funko to pay for the rights to use all these different brands for their figures. So if I was Funko, the first thing I would do is I would go and look at all my licenses and find out which ones have been profitable and which ones haven't been. And I would cut out the non-profitable ones, just get rid of them, right? You can come back to them at a later time if it turns out to be worth it. But right now, stick with what actually sells, what is actually making you money, and then the licenses you do keep, you need to go renegotiate those contracts and only go after characters or films or IPs that have grand potential, right? Like, I think right now the big thing they're pushing is K-pop Demon Slayers or Demon Hunters or whatever it is off Netflix. Merch for that's going to sell. That's going to be a big drop. That'll be big income for them because that's the right age range. Adults too, but mainly kids. Kids love that show, and they're going to want the figures from the show. They're going to want to collect something from the show. Um, another thing they could do is well, and none of this is going to work unless they sell to a bigger company who has time to play with them, or they sell to a private entity that can take things back to square one and kind of rebuild from there. Because as long as you're publicly traded, unless you're putting up the same big freaking numbers you've been putting up, nobody's going to be satisfied. Everybody's going to sell off the shares. Nobody else is going to buy them up, and you're going to be stuck in this just downhill slope. But if they were to go back to a private company, I would turn back the hands of time and start doing limited releases, right? Don't flood stores with a bunch of crappy pops. Do limited releases, and with those limited releases, still do chases, but maybe make it more of a blind box thing because that seems to be the trend right now. That's the other thing they got to realize is like you're in this new age of labubu's and blind boxes and all that kind of stuff. You got to stay hip to the trends if you want to survive. You can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and expect different results. If it's not working anymore, back to the drawing board and start all over again. But I've got a lot of Funkos of movies I like. Big Lebowski, Seinfeld, things like that. Like I've got a lot of those Funkos, and those were cool. But I'm not obsessively collecting them. Like I might collect Big Lebowski things. And the only reason I bought the Big Lebowski Funkos, it's not because they were Funkos, but because they were the IP I enjoyed, right? And I think that's the majority of their sales. They're not going to have these lunatic collectors that buy every Funko that drops. They're going to have a TV show, a movie, a cartoon that they're really into, and they're going to buy anything related to that. And you can't expect them just because they bought one type of Funko from you to come buy 100 more. And I think that's what they were banking on. That they were the collectible. The IP that they were making wasn't the collectible. They were the collectible. And it's just, we see where I got them. But let me know in the comments below your thoughts, opinions. Are you a Funko collector? Do you hope they make it? Are you finally glad that they may be falling into the abyss? There's lots of people that hate Funkos, so it goes both ways. But engage below. I'll reply to any interesting comments, and we'll see you on the next video. Peace.